Hello, I'm Marisa Novara. I'm Vice President of Community Impact at the Chicago Community Trust. Welcome to Trust Talks, Episode 24, Sustaining Chicago's Cultural Ecosystem. For generations, Chicago has been a city shaped by creativity. From vibrant murals to world-class museums, to neighborhood theaters and local artists, arts and culture is what brings life and identity to communities across our region. At the Trust, as we work to increase neighborhood investment and build community wealth, arts and culture continue to be essential. The Trust has supported the arts since its founding in 1915, and we are proud to fund many organizations across the city and country through our donor-advised program, grant making, and sponsorships. The arts strengthen our economy, deepen social connection, and give residents meaningful ways to engage with and influence the places they call home. But we also know that many of our South and West Side neighborhoods have not had the same access to arts and culture resources. And that imbalance limits the ability of artists, cultural organizations, and community members to fully participate in and benefit from the creative economy. That's why the Trust invested $3.9 million through our Arts and Culture for Community Wealth funding opportunity, supporting community-driven projects that elevate creativity, activate public spaces, build collaboration, and expand economic opportunity in neighborhoods that have long experienced underinvestment or displacement. We believe deeply that arts and culture have the power to bridge divides, raise awareness, and spark collective action. They preserve the histories, identities, and traditions that define our neighborhoods, while also encouraging community investment that helps minimize displacement. In today's episode, we'll explore how Chicago's cultural ecosystem can not only be sustained, but strengthened, especially in communities where creative expression has long been a source of pride, resilience, and possibility.
Welcome to Trust Talks episode 24. I am Iona Calhoun-Batiste, Senior Director of Collective Power at the Chicago Community Trust. Chicago is one of the nation's most influential cultural cities, home to world-renowned architecture, a powerful museum ecosystem, and a vibrant grassroots art scene rooted in our neighborhoods. From theater to public art, culture shapes our neighborhood's identity and fuels our economy. For more than a century, the Trust has stood alongside Chicago's arts community, and our commitment to arts and culture remains steady and strong. As our strategies evolve, we continue to honor the vision of our donors while aligning support with our mission to expand opportunities and prosperity across Chicago for all. This is about purposeful investment, recognizing arts as essential infrastructure that strengthens local businesses, connects communities, and drives economic mobility, especially in places where the investment makes the most difference. Today, we're exploring what it takes to sustain a thriving, equitable cultural sector and why investing in both legacy institutions and community-based organizations is essential to Chicago's future. I am honored to be joined by three amazing leaders who embody this work. Janelle Nelson, director of the Inglewood Arts Collective, David Feiner, co-founder of the Albany Park Theater Project, and Nora Daly, board chair of the Illinois Arts Council. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yes. Just take a moment to introduce yourselves. Nora, we can start with you.
Sure. Nora Daly. Wear a lot of different hats in the city and across the state. I have the honor and privilege of being the board chair of the Illinois Arts Council, among kind of many other projects that I work in here in Chicago. And I am thrilled to be a part of this awesome discussion.
Hey. I am Janelle Nelson. I fashion myself a creative strategist. That tends to be the phrase that encapsulate the hats that I wear. I'm also director of Inglewood Arts Collective, a nonprofit, a community org of artists that work together primarily in the lane of creative placemaking. I'm also an artist myself and a creative small business owner. and a child of Inglewood.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
But, a woman of Chicago.
Yeah.
This entire city is ours.
Yeah.
I'm David Feiner. I am co-founder and co-executive director alongside Miguel Rodriguez of Albany Park Theater Project, or APTP. APTP is a youth-centered theater company based in the Albany Park neighborhood on the northwest side of the city, where teens create original theater inspired by the real-life stories of immigrant first-generation Chicagoans. We draw an audience of 5,000 people each year to see the theater performances that the teens create. That audience comes from the neighborhood, of course, but throughout Chicago and beyond, and also run programs in Albany Park Public Schools for 750 students every year.
That's great.
Really glad to be here.
Yeah.
Well, we are so glad. I'm so glad all of you all are here. We're going to get right into some of these amazing questions because we definitely want to hear from you all. At the Trust, we work with a diverse group of donors who have deep, long-standing passions for Chicago cultural institutions. How can we honor those traditional legacies while also inviting donors to see how their giving can help improve economic stability today?
Mhm.
Nora, I'm going to direct that question to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think the trust has such a rich history. And so I think you guys have done a wonderful job of balancing that. There's investing in kind of the traditional arts and cultural organizations is just as important as investing in what's going on in communities. I don't think it's an either or. I think it's a both and. I think we need to support and have a world-class symphony and opera and theater and so much of that kind of, those organizations tend to be in the loop in the downtown area. But I think it's just as important that we educate and just kind of bring to awareness of all the amazing things that are happening across our city. I mean, these are just two awesome examples. And really, when you go and you experience the art, it's transformative. And so I think it's really just kind of a call to call to action for so many of those very generous supporters and contributors to the trust who are curious. They're curious about our city. And so I think it's just really so much of this is just kind of communication and opportunity and letting them know about some of the awesome projects that they can invest in. And I do believe, like you were saying, I think arts and culture is essential infrastructure. It is the lifeblood of communities. They tend to be the first anchor in a neighborhood, or in in a rural community in Illinois. When you see kind of the downtown or the main street being revitalized, it tends to be artists and creative businesses that are the first there. And then kind of more of the traditional businesses tend to kind of populate the block, but they are really on the forefront. So I'm really excited to be having this conversation for everyone to learn a little bit more about what's happening here in Inglewood, and as well as at the Albany Park neighborhood.
Yeah, thank you. Tell us a little bit more about the Illinois Arts Council. What are you guys doing? I know what you're doing, but our listeners may not know what you're doing. And how you're also driving economic development.
We are, that's really how I talk about it, is through an economic lens. It's investing in small businesses. It's investing in medium-sized businesses across the state. So we have a very robust arts programming, really funding for artists and arts organizations. Our artists are creative entrepreneurs. And one of the things that we've recently done, which I think has been really important and intentional, was our program team is now focused on regions and focused on communities in Chicago. Because you can be the dance expert, say, or the theater expert, but I think it's much more important for us to know what's happening in these communities. Where are there investments? Where can we work with our sister agencies and say, oh, this is happening? Why don't we look at one of the goals for this year at the Illinois Arts Council that I'm going to be doing with the governor's team is really trying to break down those silos in government. There's money in DCEO and the Illinois Department of Natural Resources and Department of Juvenile Justice and Public Health. And I think one of the goals for this year is for us to be able to really break down those silos and provide opportunities, more opportunities for public dollar investment to creative businesses across the state.
I love that. And I know you're very, very arts council's very interested in weaving that public and private dollars together. So it really expands artists' understanding of where these opportunities live, considering there were funding cuts. That's amazing.
Mhm.
That's amazing work. I'm going to move over to Janelle. Janelle, sometimes you often describe art as infrastructure and not an ornament, like we talked about. Can you share how public art and cultural programming help stabilize place, attract investment, and fold together the communities that have long been separated by race, class, and perception?
Yes, thank you for that question. As Nora was saying, art is a catalyst. I know this, I live it, I breathe it, I've seen it, and I'm seeing it currently. It is a catalyst for economic investment and civic cohesion, which also in turn drives economic investment. Um, Art is a catalyst of these things even before traditional market, metrics catch up
Mhm.
to it.
Mhm.
The artists come first to
Mhm.
areas that may be, sketchy or have like, not so great narratives. Um, so it's near and dear to me, and I'm very passionate about the fact that arts is not just decoration.
Mhm.
Artists are not simply, folks that you invite in after you figured out what to do and you just have them make something quote unquote look good. Artists are creative problem solvers and can be leaders in their community by virtue of their skill and their talent, but also in the ways in which artists and creatives work together and within the community and of the community. If I were to be more specific and less theoretical, I could speak to two examples. One, an artistic act or a piece of public art and a public art activation helping to develop the corner of 58th and Halsted. Um, that area was quote unquote a dead zone, right? And there was a public competition 5 years ago for someone to put up a mural. It was through the mayor at that time's investment strategy for different corridors in the city. And we applied, we won the grant, and right away we knew while we have muralists as part of our collective, we didn't form to simply get mural jobs because we are literally a collective of 10 multidisciplinary artists with our own artistic practices. So what happens when artists come together? What happens when artists, knowing the power of the art that they can do, mobilize? And so we turned that mural making day into a day of celebration. And we used ourselves as a platform to invite over like 10 different other community orgs that are already doing the work. There's so many people in so many communities throughout Chicago, throughout this country, honestly, that are doing quote unquote the work. And it may not be necessarily a bunch of painters. It may be folks that are helping provide resources and food justice, right? And so we basically turned this was 5 years ago, where we did it and it became our signature like vibration of this is what happens when EAC shows up. It is a festival. This is so festive. This is joyous. We gave away diapers. We had yoga on the lawn and all of these other things. We had a drumming circle and we had a live band. And while that might seem like a lot of fun, and it was, we raised the vibration of the community. We started to shift the narrative. People started to trust what is happening when it's all of this energetic love energy, but it's also catalytically starting to change people's understandings and expectations. And that site helped mobilize what was already happening with another community org, Grow Greater Inglewood, um, as a future site for the Inglewood Nature Trail. And Inglewood Arts Collective, we put a mural there, we beautified the viaduct. Now when you drive down Halsted and you enter into the community, there's this huge visual signature because as a graphic designer I always say that our lived environment is also a language. And it's also markers of not just quality of life, but who deserves investment, who lives here, what type of place is this? And so from that one act, we have now started to change the look of the space. And 5 years later, I can proudly say that farmers markets happen there regularly in season. I've also put up another sculpture in that space that has become a touch point for tours. And now people come there, and schools and students and design students. And so it's become this hub, a frequent hub of economic activity, which also has health and safety outcomes. And that's just, it's mobilized. And that's one example of how art can mobilize.
Yeah.
I'm not going to like hijack this entire conversation, but I can talk.
Keep going.
That's awesome.
The other part to your question was about, well, I want to bring up public art because that's an example of public art, right? But then also art activations. And another capstone initiative in our portfolio is the EAC Arts Village. That's the name that I coined to kind of encapsulate what happens when we get together and we do a bunch of stuff. And it's like, sometimes it's kid-centric where it's very young, and other times it's our young at heart. And we have, elders come out and line dance, and we have pottery making, and it's a village, right? And the most prominent expression of the EAC Arts Village for 5 years running has been showing up at the Inglewood Music Fest. The EMF, the Inglewood Music Fest, is the brainchild of the local alderman, but there's power in partnerships. And so I cannot overstate how important it is for people from all, as you said, break down the silos, right? Government and other entities to work with creatives. And so the alderman invited us a few years ago to, and I quote, just do what y'all do. Can you just come here and do what you do? And so we raised money, and we showed up, and we showed out. And so last year was a great example of, it was the biggest footprint in the festival. Over, I think, 20,000 people on Eventbrite bought tickets, and EAC activated the daytime programming, multi-generational programming, because the fest went on from noon to 9 p.m. And so there was a narrative, I will say was in past tense, that you don't go to Inglewood because it's not safe, and I don't know, but people from all over made it a point to come to this festival. Bring the babies, come on grandma, come on uncle, come and not just look at public art, because we also did that. We brought in and we partnered with Floating Museum, and the Shed Aquarium partnered with us on our Kids Zone. So we crossed these divides of Chicago institutions. But I'm so proud to say over the years, we have employed over 300 other, my beloved 1099ers. Those artists that don't always get to shine. And so we contract our artist friends and our friends of friends and people that we know are even sometimes afraid to call themselves creatives because they have a day job. But it's like, no, you are an artist too. And all the people that help make events like that run. Small business owners and vendors that helped us build the mural walls, the fabricators, the contractors, the balloon lady, the drummers, the people that help put together the stage and the skating rink. This is creative acts directly having economic impact. And yes, that is like one day, but we have this roster now, and we employ these people whenever we can. Whenever we get the funding, it funnels right back out. And so, yeah,
Well,
that's my answer to that.
That's awesome.
I had the pleasure of coming to the Inglewood Music Fest and I'll say Art Festival. And what I was really struck by was, one, you are absolutely right. It was multi-generational. So I even brought my mom. And she found something, that
she made a
connects
protest
with.
poster.
Yeah. Well, yeah, she was protesting back in the day. So, yeah. And then I saw the young 6-year-olds in the roller skates. And what I thought was like so innovative about it was like, this is such a different approach to a festival, right? I think Chicago is known for our festivals. We have huge festivals. People come from other states just to engage in our festivals. And that's really one of the draws of being a Chicagoan, is that we get to pick and choose where part of the city we want to go to. Do you think the Inglewood Arts Festival is coming into that realm. You've got um, the orgs like the Silver Room Block Party that, really did amazing work. You've got other things that happen in Hyde Park festivals, and you've got even art festivals that happen in Ravenswood and so forth. Do you think your footprint is on its way, and how do you need to sustain it? That might be too big of a question, and that's like not on my paper, but
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I will say this. Festivals are tough, right? They are so expensive. And I cannot overstate that EAC's footprint within the EMF was because EMF was pushed by the Alderman's Board, right? Like this was their fest, and we were invited, and we kind of took over a little bit. But even without the festival, what the artists did and what we do can still exist. We can put up a stage in a vacant lot. We just need
Yeah.
the support.
yeah.
And it's not
Everybody
about-
can't do that. I'll just say that.
Everybody can't.
Yeah.
And so I have to, yes, I am affiliated with some really dope people,
Yeah.
some geniuses, for those who know. But I also like to say we're not unicorns. We are proud to represent. We chose to take a risk on ourselves because we knew the truth of who we are, and we wanted to represent the community that we all grew up in. And I think that there's a lot of power and transformative change that can happen when folks really believe in unity and trusting creatives. So to get back to the point of whether or not we think that what we have been doing at the Inglewood Music Fest is sustainable, I think it absolutely is, even if the festival landscape in Chicago, because it has changed. The Silver Room Block Party is over. I know that there are very real fundraising issues with just having a festival in general. But if EAC still got investment, because Inglewood is a highly historically disinvested area. There's so many vacant lots. There's so many spaces to continue to do this, what I like to call heart work and energy work. But it amplifies the very real resource sharing and community work that has to continue to happen in communities like Inglewood for it to continue to thrive.
Yeah.
Let art be a catalyst.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm just going to add,
Yes,
I'm going to jump in real
Please,
quick. And
please,
yeah,
yes.
no, I mean, but I think that's really important for people to know. Like they need to invest in these opportunities. And just because there's a partnership doesn't mean that everyone needs to get paid. They do, there's a partnership with the shed. Yes, bring your expertise, but no one can do anything for free. And I think that one of the frustrating things is, I think there is this perception like, well, artists can just do it for free.
Oh,
It's like, no, 1099. These are jobs. These are
Yes.
this is like, talk about economic development. You're investing in people.
That's right.
And so I think it's really important that we kind of, like any other business, say what we need in order to make the organization or the event thrive, because we tend to always try and figure it out. And I think we just need to let people know that this is just as important as an investment as anything else that you would be doing. So
Yeah. No,
that's mine too.
that's a great point. And speaking of investments, so investments can start early, right? So David, the Albany Park Theater Project is legendary for its youth engagement. How does investing in a young person's creative education, serve as a bridge to professional career paths and long-term economic stability for them and their families?
I love this question, and I'm really grateful for it. Thank you. And I have a number of ways I want to talk about that. So I think, the first one is that when we talk about so many of the arts organizations in Chicago that are working with young people are community-based organizations that are working with young people to create art that is about their communities, emerges from their communities, or is about their city. And so what we're talking about, right, is young people having an opportunity to look at the world, represent the world as they see it, and also to think about and imagine the world as they think it should be or as they would like it to be, right? So those are two tools that are about developing skills that that are essential for problem solving and for future thinking. We also, artists make something out of nothing. And I don't mean with nothing, right? To Nora's point, right? Payment is really important, but artists are always sitting down and you're starting from nothing and you're creating something. Again, incredible tools for whatever field a young person might go into eventually. I think, arts is a great way to start for entrepreneurs. You talked, about being a creative entrepreneur, right? I also, want to talk about arts as employment. Many of our youth arts organizations in the city of Chicago are employing young people as artists. Albany Park Theater Project does that. I know Theater Best in Chicago. Our friends at Free Street Theater are employing young people. Our friends at Collaboration are employing young people. And again, those are three examples of organizations that are employing young people, yes, to make art, and to be looking at their community and looking at their city and making art in response to what they see and making art about how they want the world to be, and they're getting paid to do it. Using Albany Park Theater Project as one example, we in 2023 we opened a show called Port of Entry, which is a site-specific and immersive performance that essentially recreates an apartment building in the Albany Park neighborhood where immigrants from all parts of the world live side by side with one another. And this is a show created by teens about their community and performed by young people. And they are paid for their rehearsal time and they're paid for their performance time. And since we opened that show in 2023, that show's resulted in more than $500,000 in youth employment. So I think that's a really important point. I think another important point is, and this kind of ties into that sense of looking at the world, seeing the world as it is, thinking about the world as you want it to be, as it should be. Our young people from Albany Park Theater Project, yes, we have some who will pursue careers in the arts, but by and large, they're not coming in and saying, "Oh, I'm training to be an artist," right? They're saying, I'm training to be the person I want to be in the world, and I'm training to be somebody who can make a difference for my family, who can make a difference for my community, who can make a difference for my city. And so, the number one profession that our young people go into is education. We have more of our alumni working as teachers than anything else. We also have, an incredible number who've gone on to work for electeds, who are working in aldermanic offices, who are working as community organizers. And so again, there's that sense, I think, that comes out of particularly, there's something just magical about a youth arts program and how it gets you to be seeing the world.
David, can I
Yeah,
ask you
please.
this? Young people may not have that ability to express themselves through school and some of the more academics. Talk about how you see this level of expression come out through young people, through the works that they do. And how does that resonate with the community?
If you are working as a young person in the arts, you are making something that can matter to your community, whether that's a mural. If you're a young person and you're involved in a mural project and that mural stays up and becomes a hub in your neighborhood, every time you walk by that mural, every time you drive by that mural, you can look at it and say, I did something that people care about. That it's not about developing future leaders. It's about developing right now leaders who can look at that. The young people who are involved in Port of Entry, we have people coming from all over the neighborhood, but also all over the city, flying in from around the country, who are coming in to study this show, who are coming in to look at what these young people are doing. And, next week we have the cast and the crew working on the immersive show Theater of the Mind at the Goodman. They're all coming for a private showing of Port of Entry as a way to see how immersive theater is being done, right? So our youth are an example to people, and this gets at that question that you were asking earlier about the relationship between kind of the the mainstream legacy downtown institutions and the neighborhood institutions. There is a beautiful reciprocal and relationship there. And so when a young person is involved in making something, and people are saying, somebody comes up and says, this is the most memorable. I've been going to theater for 50 years. This is one of the most memorable theater experiences I've ever had. That catalyzes something inside of a young person who can be starting to think like, oh, okay, I have value. What I have to say has value. My contributions have value. And again, that transcends the arts, right? Whether that young person then goes on and says, I have value as an artist, I'm going to pursue my art making professionally, great. It may just be my experience has value, my culture has value, my voice has value. And I'm going to take that into my future, and I'm going to believe in myself.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
have a
anyone
quick
chime in?
comment. I know we're on the mic.
Yeah, yeah.
I just want to piggyback on something, or broadly to everything you said. But I just have to state, historically, through policies or what have you, there's time and time again, this country will cut its nose off to spite its face. I think that's the phrase. But basically, racism and systemic inequality has hurt everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Investing in the arts helps everyone. Investing in the youth, using arts and creative solutions, directly serving the people where they are in all communities, especially divested ones, but also incredibly pouring into the youth or populations that have been historically overlooked. It helps everyone. I'm going to bring up a phrase Nora brought. The silos need to be broken down in every respect. Yes, silos work in terms of keeping things organized sometimes, but when we think about the value and the power of investment, it needs to be thought of as a seed. So, you may be giving to this one org, but look at who they are exponentially helping. Listening to you speak reminded me of that. It triggered, just awareness of some of the work that we do. When we get funding, we immediately help out a host of folks that may be invisible to certain groups. And then the acts that they do and the testimonies that come back to me, and I'm sure to you as well, it's affirming in the work that you do, but it's also that data that doesn't always get uplifted about, how can I put this? It's having impact that isn't always acknowledged, because too often the negative impacts are what's seen.
Yeah.
A salacious news story about teens downtown being teens gets more coverage than what didn't happen, because the teens were doing something that gave them, that was passion fueled and also put money in their pockets and into their households. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the other, the one other thing I want to mention related to this is that so many of the organizations that work with young people in the arts are also working directly with them to imagine their futures post high school. And, college is not the only way to a future. And also, we know that it is still true, right, that a college education typically means $1 million more in earnings over a lifetime, that college educated folks are more likely to have health insurance, which also results in, healthier life and longer life. Many of our peer organizations, including Albany Park Theater Project, we have post-secondary counseling programs that are, and we're doing that. We are a culture that when you walk in to us as a 7th grader or an 8th grader, you're surrounded by other young people and by alums of the organization who are thinking about and demonstrating that this future planning in ways that are bold. And our former board chair Samir Mayakar calls our young people at Albany Park Theater Project distance travelers, right? Because there is this sense you're like looking at this culture of, and Miguel Rodriguez, my co-executive director, talks about people leading choice-filled lives, right? That you come in as a young person and you see other young people around you, just a little bit older than you, who are making choices about their futures. And often our arts organizations, we have multi-year relationships
Yeah.
with young people, which is, so essential to helping a young person get from, I've always wanted to do this, to, oh, okay, I can do this. There are people who will help me figure out how to do this.
Yeah, yeah. This is also great. And something I've heard all of you all talk about are the legacy organizations.
Mm.
And what I'm seeing more often now is the legacy organizations are starting to be a bridge, using art as that bridge to more community-based arts organizations. Talk to me a little bit about that. How can we encourage that? How is that beneficial to Albany Park Theater? Taking young people, not only like, hey, we're going to take all these kids down to downtown to the Goodman. How is the Goodman coming to you? Talk to me a little bit. Do we see that? Can we see that? Anyway.
You take it
I'll
first.
kick it off. I'll kick it off. You all jump
You
in.
go there.
Cut me off. I see it. One of my favorite things that I like to do is quote unquote bully a whether it be a city department or a partnering org. And I say bully in quotation marks. It's all love and friendly, but it's I leverage the fact that for example, DCASE in past years has partnered with Inglewood Arts Collective on a few occasions. I have worked as a project manager for a large-scale mural initiative where I was able to bring on board some prominent names in the Chicago art scene to erect some murals, but also hire an lesser-known Black woman-owned tech company to do a value add to the murals and create augmented reality to the murals, right? Which as a theme isn't new, but that was not even part of the scope of what they were asking for. And so by bringing in an arts group and letting us do what we do, it's like, hey, we can make this really pop, let's go. And DCASE is an arts department, right? So maybe that's an easy lift. But I've also, I say all the time that institutions that think they want to bring an artist to the table needs that artist more than they know. And I encourage folks to bring them to the table before the project is cooked, before the idea and the budgets have been totally planned. And don't come to an artist or an arts group and say, here's our budget and here's what we want. It should be more like, oh, well, here's what we're thinking about this year. We would like to do something like this in the fall, and we're working with this amount. Here's our goals, big picture, because creatives, and yes, there are some artists that just want to do their art. I am the talent. Let me do my genius. And I respect that. But one size does not fit all. And just like there is a wide tapestry of humans, when we think about artists and creatives, we can't just attach a label to them and think of them only as producers of said craft. To your point, when you pour into some of the youth and they come out, they may not label themselves as an artist, but they are creative problem solvers.
Exactly.
And so when I think about legacy institutions, I think that it is a scaffolded, multilateral benefit. When we work with, from the MCA to Shed Aquarium to the Mag Mile Association to the Nature Museum to DCASE to Department of Housing, Department of Planning and Development, and or just folks who just want to do maybe some type of study or awareness, artists can be that buffer against gross generalizations that can lead to gentrification outcomes. Artists can be not just the producers of these beautiful things, but we can help those legacy institutions hold themselves to the values that they say they really want to uphold. So we're kind of like accountability partners, as well as consultants, as well as value adders, as much as we are the producers of the said initiative.
Yeah.
I think it's about reframing the expectations of what can come when you work with artists and when you really invest in creatives. It's not always about getting a mural in the office of said legacy institution. It might be about said legacy institution wanting to increase their foot traffic. Maybe that museum has had a slow maybe they want to have better outreach in a particular neighborhood. Maybe they really want to see themselves as a Chicago institution, but they're not really getting all of Chicagoans to be a part of their audience. Work with an artist or an artist group to help you meet those metrics. I think a lot of beautiful things can happen when we kind of expand our understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nora,
Maybe
I'm
not
gonna
It's
punt
like-
to you for
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
It's like a new definition for partnership. And, you know, I think what is really important is that it's the artists, it's the creatives, the orgs in the community that are saying, we are interested. I'm sure it was like little people that wanted to see the shed, or maybe not, maybe I'm wrong. But, you know, but where are those really creating authentic partnerships and making sure it's not what they want, but it's what the community wants.
Yeah, it's not just extractive.
Yeah.
It's transactional and respectful ways.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
And they're the experts, you know, bringing in their expertise,
Mhm.
but also understanding that it's a two-way street. And I really love this example of the Goodman, David Byrne, and this really big, spectacular thing that's going to be happening in River North. And they know they need to learn more. So what other better theater immersive project in Chicago? There is none other than the Albany Park. And so I think that is just an amazing story of, you know, the Goodman has been around for 100 years, understanding there's more to learn, and we can learn from artists, young artists, and a community-based theater company that is really doing extraordinary work.
Yeah.
I think, thank you for that. Yeah, I think, you know, I'm thinking of a couple of really good examples. I think that the lyric opera did some really interesting work under Anthony Freud and Cayenne Harris when she was there, which was not just about how do we get young people in Chicago to fall in love with opera, right? It's not about how do we get them to appreciate this, you know, operas that are hundreds years old. They were like looking and building relationships to say, let's make some operas in communities in Chicago about those communities
Yeah.
with people from those neighborhoods. Let's bring our expertise in the form, but also let's stretch the form. Let's stretch the definition. Let's not be afraid to say that opera, you know, can be made out of folk songs, right? I think that's a really wonderful example. For several years in the early the 2010s, Goodman gave Albany Park Theater Project a slot every summer in the Owen Theater, and we were there for 3 to 5 weeks performing our shows because I think, you know, the Goodman and John Collins, who's now the executive director at the Goodman, John was really a good friend to us and really, you know, kind of launched this and backed this, saw, oh, there is a company that is doing something that isn't being done elsewhere, that we're not doing, that our theater isn't doing, and let's expand the audience for that.
Yes.
Let's bring that to our audience, and also let's bring their audience down and introduce them to the Goodman, because Albany Park Theater's audience is going to come down to see their company here, and it might be there for many of them. It's going to be their first time walking into the space. So I think, you know, there are these novel ways of thinking about that. And I think, you know, when we talk about, you know, going back to kind of where you started this with, you know, the trust's donors and their intention, I think maybe a message, right, is the reality is we have to increase the pot of money, right? I mean, right? We we have to not be thinking either or. We
Yeah.
have to not be approaching this from, is the money going to the legacy institutions or is the money going to the organizations working in the neighborhoods? We have to be creative and clever and bold and generous and find enough money, kind of thinking in um not thinking that scarcity mindset, but thinking that abundance mindset, and find a way to fully invest in both types of organizations.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
this is great because we know that the data trends after COVID, audience decline was affecting not only the legacy institutions, but the community-based ones. So this partnership, working in collaboration, really is a give-give on both sides, win-win on both entities. And we also know that organizations like you said, the Lyric, are being really intentional around how they bring in diverse voices with a new and they're working in collaboration with other organizations, smaller, like the Court Theater, around a new project they're working on. And then we look at the Harris Theater, who has a whole incubating space for organizations to really get their footing into be a space. All of that also grows the audience base for all the organizations. So that's great. I'm going to pivot us, and then we're going to do something really fun. All right. So, knowing that at the trust, we're really focused on those wealth gap. We understand development in communities to be, pretty core to some of our work. We know that when there is development in communities, sometimes it could be off-putting, right? Where it feels a little like gentrification. Talk to me about how artists can be and what happens when artists are at the planning table with a developer as opposed to being that afterthought we talked about.
Mhm.
I know that's like us. I just kind of sprung that one on you guys. But what happens when when artists are truly in partnership with development
Yeah.
and
Well,
developers who typically they not know Albany Park Theater, and they probably don't know how to work with
Mhm.
artists. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, I would use the example that the Inglewood, Artist Collective was using in a vacant lot in that mural. I mean, that's the beginning of seeing an investment in the beautification and acknowledging this is the entry point for our community. Um, I think that there is probably a ways to go working with kind of traditional developers, at least in my experience. But I think that there is that opportunity. I think so much of what we do, community-based organizations and different, artists working across the city is, um, a lot of the work is workforce development work. It really is. You guys, I mean, this is, we can use all the words that, people use about investing, and I think really looking at the wealth gap is workforce development. It's jobs. It's
Yeah.
investing in people. It's investing in all ages groups of people. Investing in these vacant lots and to provide opportunities for engagement. I love the intergenerational because I think it's really important that everything isn't just for one group. That it is really important, I think, is for communities that intergenerational conversation and opportunity for engagement is really just going to strengthen us all.
Yeah,
Man, what a question.
I know.
It's layered because we could talk about I could just talk about vacant lots and how that is a very layered reality because some of these lots, many of them are owned by Cook County Land Bank, but some of them are owned privately by folks who do not live in the community or even in the state. And so how do we develop something that we have to fight to even own? And that's like the systemic, that takes time, right? So if I think about developers and working with developers, my mind keeps going to Unblocked Inglewood, which is a project where Inglewood Arts Collective, we are the beautification stewards of a highly collaborative project. It is Tonika Lewis Johnson's project where we are working. It was her brainchild, but we're working with the Chicago Bungalow Association and EAC and our local aldermen and other investors to take what I call it a beautiful science experiment. We have one city block where initially arts funding is used to make home repairs. Because how can you put up a mural and have folks really care about a nice sculpture when their porch and their roof is falling apart?
Mm-hmm.
And that project alone is a whole other TED talk. But basically, that is the way it is. And so many people in the communities like the West and South Side, the South and West Side of Chicago, are due to predatory redlining and nefarious land sale contracts. And that's why there hasn't been equity and generational wealth to even make the home repairs. But this is what we have. So what can we do? And right now, investing into creative solutions, investing into orgs that are doing work and problem solving in ways. If a developer can work with us, people that are already working on a project that is becoming a study for something that could be replicated elsewhere, because now we have sculptures up on this block. We are beautifying it to a caliber that is just as, or in my opinion, in some ways even better than if you go to like Fulton Market District and you have all these cool murals and things happening. And we've got, other MacArthur geniuses like Amanda Williams painting a house on the block. So now architecture biennial tours are coming into this neighborhood, and so we're folding the map of the city and having people from all over come into a community where they otherwise wouldn't. We're inviting developers too, landscape architects, people with all types of skill sets. So when I tackle the question of developers, it's me challenging the developer to trust. It's not a gamble. It's trust what you see and trust what is happening in people that are already doing the work and investing in ways that will give you a return, because when artists are at the table, the community investment is so high.
Yeah.
It is not just an org that's parachuting into a community and we're going to put this thing here. And the neighbors on the block, but also I'm doing this to represent a radius.
Yeah.
The surrounding area, people that don't even live on the block, they just want to be down. They see what we're doing. They're like, yo, I'm gonna come out and I'm gonna help shovel. I'm gonna do this. Or when's your next block party? Can I? Because people want to attach themselves to something good because they know that we're not necessarily bringing good, quote unquote, to the hood. We're amplifying the good that was already there.
Yeah.
And a developer needs to help us develop that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
David.
So it's trust.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah,
No.
really quick,
Yes.
no. One of the other hats I wear is I'm co-chair of the Chicago Architecture Biennial, and that's a perfect example of working with Tanika and Amanda on this project. But the strength of the project is the homeowner, George.
Yes.
His story was the story that resonates with the beauty of the project.
And you can't even make that up, right?
No.
His name is George.
Yes, I know.
His name is George Washington Carver Blue.
Yes.
And, connecting the history of that Black inventor to this man who is the de facto caretaker of the block. He was landscaping the block before we could even get money to help him.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And it's bringing it onto this international, the biennial is an international biennial, 100 participants from 35 countries.
Yeah.
And so this is a part of a global conversation, what's happening in the Black project. So just kind of connecting those dots, which is so Chicago, which I love.
Yeah. Chicago. We're everywhere.
Yeah.
In a good way.
Yeah, and I think, and I don't know what you were going to ask something.
No, I was just going to say, how do developers
Yeah.
engage with you? With
I
Albany
think,
Park?
I think there's two really simple and really important questions to ask. Who benefits and who gets hurt? And, I think if we're looking at a development project, we got to ask those questions. And then we have to be open to hearing the answers and potentially making changes in response to that. And I think it's, I think also, and I think this is, and this is true for arts organizations too, right? Because sometimes arts organizations are coming in, from outside the neighborhood, looking at a neighborhood where the property is cheaper, or maybe there's a building that the city wants to offer them or something like that, right? And that may not be an arts organization that has a deep history there. So again, it's about saying, who's going to benefit from this? Who could potentially be hurt by this? How do we mitigate the harm
Mm-hmm.
and maximize and expand
Mhm.
the benefit? And I think, to something Janelle said, it's so important, right? Is having the humility, if you were not part of the neighborhood, and I say this as somebody who 29 years ago started an arts organization in a neighborhood that was not my neighborhood. Having the humility to listen to people who were there about what are the treasures and the assets, and not believe that things are as you see them because your lens might be different. I think it's one of the things that our show Port of Entry is trying to do, right? Is to say, you might see a building from the outside. It might look dilapidated. It might be owned by an absentee landlord who is not investing in that building. Those things do create problems and challenges for the community, but also let's not just look at what's outside. Let's look at what's happening inside of that building, because the people inside that building, even if they are being victimized by, an absentee landlord who's not investing in that building, they are creating a remarkable ecosystem of survival
Mm-hmm.
inside of that building. And so let's not dismiss, say, an entire building, an entire block, because of how it appears to us from our lens.
Absolutely. Kudos. I love it. Love it. All right. This is our last question. So I listened to a lot of podcasts, so I borrowed this from somebody else, but I really love this. So we're going to do a round robin real quick. We call it Love It or Leave It. So name one Chicago-based art tradition that you love, and one terrible stereotype about a starving artist that we want to leave behind.
Mm.
I'll go. You want me to go first?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay, I'll
there
go
you
first. So one art neighborhood-based art tradition that I absolutely love is the Chicago House Music Festival. I just love that. It's just you're dancing, we're free, everybody's there, everybody's just vibing. It's a point to, just sit, everybody's bringing food. It's a huge picnic with this amazing art of music. And so I love that. One thing that I'm gonna leave behind as a starving artist is that starving artists have no businesses.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
100%.
I hate
Number
that.
one.
Yep.
I absolutely hate that. A starving artist could have a lot of business sense. It's
Yeah.
just gotta give them the option and the opportunity. So that's my love or leave it. I hope I didn't take anybody's.
Kind of did. It's
Yeah.
okay. We're going
It's all right. We got others.
I mean, I think that Chicago is a global leader in investing in public art. And I think it's something that I'd like to see more of. And I was going to do the starving art, is the business sense of, because they're entrepreneurs. Many artists are entrepreneurs and they have smart business sense. And that narrative for sure, that needs to be flipped. Many are creative business owners themselves. So, and I got to pick something else that I'm gonna have to think first.
Okay, we'll come
Okay,
back. We'll come back.
okay, fine.
Okay.
Love it or leave it. I love, and I know this is not necessarily unique to Chicago, but nobody does it like Chicago. I love our storytelling and the way we do tours. Shout out to everyone's favorite TikTok historian.
Yes,
Yes. Agree.
So we've partnered with Dilla a lot, but also, I'm going to ask folks in the audience, wherever you may be, if you're a funder or not, Dilla might be booked, but you can figure out your own tour.
Yeah.
Reach out to an org like Albany Park, like EAC, and ask us what we've got going on. And maybe someone can host you to a litany of things that happen to be happening in that time frame. I think it's a way to educate yourselves. we're a very historic city. We move with history. Everything we do is connected to something else, and we're so proud. We're a city of 77. We're proud to rep our neighborhoods. But it's very powerful when we cross collab
Yeah.
respectfully. And I think that I love that, and I want to see more of that because I think that is also a way to mitigate harm, to mitigate parachuting gentrification outcomes. So yeah, I love tours. I love a good tour.
Okay, Janelle, where are we leaving?
I'm leaving behind the idea that I'm leaving behind traditional definitions of art. I think nail techs are artists. I think barbers are artists. We know that footworkers are a legitimate form of dance, and that's artistry as well. I think that sometimes folks that make plates in their apartments are artists too,
That's right.
culinary artists. So I
Yes,
think
I
let's
agree.
expand to include more of those homegrown neighborhood creative expressionists, and let's start calling them artists too.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
David?
I like that. I'm going to cheat and do two. There's Flavors of Albany Park, which Kay Villeman and her amazing team at North River Commission do every year. It is a food crawl through the neighborhood. There are like 4 or 5 different pathways, and you're going to actual restaurants from the neighborhood rather than food trucks being brought in from outside the neighborhood. It's amazing, and it is just joyful. And the other is the Ecuadorian parade that happens every year on Montrose, straight through Albany Park. I live right off of Montrose, and that is just a joyful day to see the floats and the dancers and the music and everybody who comes out and lines Montrose to see that, and and are walking along, and it's bringing people out to the businesses along Montrose.
Yeah. What are we leaving?
Leave it is the sense that artists are not serious people, or that because, and I think Janelle or Nora, one of you said this earlier, or that because artists are doing something that they love, they don't have to get paid for it, or they don't have to get paid as much for it. The number of times that we'll get asked to do something, by a business for less money than they would get out of bed in the morning for, right? Because, it's arts. It doesn't have to be, you could just make it happen. Just come in and do a little skit for 10 minutes, right? So I'm going to leave that.
Yeah. Nora, did you figure out your leave it?
I didn't.
It's
no.
okay.
Yeah, sorry.
No.
Right now.
I want to thank you.
Folks.
Yeah.
There you go. You said it earlier.
Yeah. I'd
Yeah.
like to, So I'm more additive. I'd like to get more investments, more money, more opportunities. Because truly, if we invested in the community arts organizations like Albany and Englewood Artist Collective, you would see transformative change happen. You are already seeing it, but with real true investment, you would be seeing change that is bigger than any developer coming in and redoing a block or a neighborhood. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nora, Janelle, and David, thank you so much for being my guests.
Oh, thank you.
I am so happy you all said yes when we emailed and asked you. I really brought a lot to life for this podcast. So I'm really very grateful. So thank you so much.
Yeah,
for
thank
being
you.
For platforming us.
Thank you.
Yeah,
This is
it's
a wonderful
great.
conversation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good way to kick off 2026.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Trust Talks. We want to hear from you. If you have thoughts about today's episode or ideas for future conversations, please reach out to us at info@cct.org. We value your feedback and look forward to hearing from you. To learn more about our work to increase wealth and well-being for all Chicagoans, please visit our website at cct.org. You can also follow the Chicago Community Trust on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram to stay up to date on the latest episodes of Trust Talks.